This video shows how to set up Web License Server on your own Linux or Windows website. The server will allow you to create and sell content to specific customers with serial number activation on each device. Your content will not be visible within a standard web browser, but instead it will be presented within the free Safe Web App Viewer, which is available for lots of environments including Mac, Windows, Linux, and Android. Go to safewebapp.com and learn a little bit more about the Safe Web App Viewer and how you can create content using either an account on Safe Activation Service 3 or with your own server, which we'll demonstrate in this video. To use Web License Server, you'll need a website that can run executables, a PHP file, and read and write data files. That type of hosting account is typically called a Virtual Private Server or VPS, or perhaps a cloud server. You can get that type of service for as little as $20 a year, but that's typically a Linux box with a fixed IP address, and it'll be up to you to install Apache and PHP. The first step in this process is to install the Web License Server on your Mac or Windows computer. After doing so, you'll see that there's an admin application that you can use to create each of your web apps and set up a list of serial numbers associated with those applications. There's also an executable for Windows and Linux, some PHP files that you upload to your server, and a sample project which we'll be demonstrating in just a few moments. Before setting up our server, let's take a quick look at the Safe Web App Viewer that we've downloaded to our computer. We'll launch the viewer and let's add an index. When we click OK or Add, here we see the index has been added, and we could scroll around. Let's say we decided that we wanted to add this particular web app. We can click and add that web app by filling in an activation dialog. We happen to know that the serial number for this app is Bird, and we'll give it a name and click Activate Now. That app is loaded to the list, and here's our app that's now presented within the view window. We can see from the list window we have our original index, which we can navigate to at any time and scroll around and look at the various apps available in that index. And we can also, we've added a particular app called Bird, which we can use at any time. And we can add other apps as well. If we wanted to add another app, we'll add an app called Cat. We happen to know that the serial number for that is Cat. And we'll give a name and Activate Now, and then again there is our Cat app. This is a very simple example, but it gives the basic idea of how Safe Web App works. We've launched the admin application for Web License Server, and we can see we've already set up our 6 apps, the cat, dog, horse, bird, rabbit, fish, and an index called Animal Tricks. Let's take a look at how one of those was set up. We'll just click on that row and a license data dialog comes up, and that one dialog has all the information required to set up one of those apps. We'll look at a few of those fields. All these fields are specifically defined in the Safe Web App User Guide. Here we can see the name of the app in the first field. It's requiring a serial number for activation, and the fields of information we'd like to collect from the customer during the activation process are a company and email address. And we're going to give a title to that app, which would be displayed in the index if we later add this app to an index. And we'll give the main topmost web page of that web application, and it's in a folder with lots of other files that all collectively define that application. There is a URL that we can provide to an information page if we'd like, and then the little info button will show up in the index associated with that entry for that web app in the index. And we can also give a description field that will show up in the index for that web app. And lastly, we have an icon that is associated next to the app name in the list panel. So that's the basic information we set up to define a web app. And there's another section on this side with some specific options to customize the user experience. We won't go through each one of these, but in general, you'll use the target section to define all the different platforms that you would like that web app to be visible to a user using a Safe Web App Player on that platform. And we'll click OK. Let's take a look at the animal tricks, which again, all the information is defined in the license data dialog. And it's similar, except this one's marked as being an index, and a few of the fields are a little bit different, but essentially it defines an entry of type index instead of a web app. So once we fill in the information for the various web apps, and there is a tutorial that comes with the web license server and also a user guide for Safe Web App that will define in detail how you would fill in that information. Once we've done that, we'll click Save Data to make changes to our licensing information, and then we'll export a file called license.data. We'll just export it to a data file here. And we're going to upload that to our website in just a few moments. Let's go to the serial number setup panel of the admin application and define a few serial numbers. So we'll select one of our apps. We already got some serial numbers defined, but we can define a few more. We see we only have 11 serial numbers so far for this cat app. If we wanted to define generate some more serial numbers, we'll click the generate button and let's generate another 10. And we can set some options, but we'll just click OK here, and now we have 21 serial numbers. And we can do that for each of the different apps that we have, to generate some serial numbers for each of those. And when we do that, we can also export that batch of serial numbers, and it exports to a file here. This particular one is called serial number 1, and we'll put that into our data folder, and we'll go ahead and do that same action for each of these different web apps. It's time to set up a remote server. We'll do that by logging into the remote server, creating some folders, uploading some files, and setting permissions on those files and folders. The specific details of that process are described in the user guide. Specifically, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be uploading the executable for either Windows or Linux to the server, these PHP files, that license.data file, and those serial number files we generated with the admin application. And within the examples folder here, there's a folder of icons we want to upload for the various images for the applications we've added, and the files that define those applications. We're going to need a way to communicate with our remote server. There's various ways. One possibility is to use the Secure Shell program within a terminal window on the Mac. So if we launch the terminal window, we can log into our remote server with the SSH program. And I'm logged in now, so I can do the various Linux commands on this Linux server. Let's take a look at a couple of those commands. Here's a command that will change our directory to a folder called WLS within the public HTML folder. And if we list the files in that folder, we can see that we have various PHP files, our executable file, and we have a folder there called Web License Data. So let's take a look at that folder, and I'll list the files in that folder. And here we see that's where we uploaded our license.data file and the various serial number files. Once everything is set up on the server, it should be ready to go, and we can verify that everything is set up properly by going to the online panel of our admin application. We'll click the status button, and if we get a status screen that shows that our admin application is synchronized and our server is online, we know everything is set up and ready to go. Now let's try out the index and the web apps that we just created on our server using the Safe Web App Player. The first thing we have to do is tell Safe Web App about our host. We can do that with a default host set command, and we can either type the URL of our host or we can use a registered host name, which we've already registered. So this is globally available to everyone on the planet. With Safe Web App, they can just type a host name and then it will know that Safe Web App should be talking to that registered host. Once we've done that, we can type the name of an index. Click Add, and there we see the index that we defined a few moments ago is available for display. If we decided we wanted to add one of these applications, we could click on the application, and we'll have to fill in our little activation dialog that we defined. We'll use a serial number from the CAT list of serial numbers that we generated earlier. And we're going to have to enter some other information that we're requesting here. We'll click Activate Now, and there is our CAT application up and running, and both the index and the CAT application we just added are in the list available for use whenever we launch Safe Web App. Let's review what we've accomplished so far. We used the admin application to define a set of apps, 6 different apps, and an index file that included those apps, and we generated the data files. We then logged into our remote server, created some folders, uploaded the executable, some PHP files, and those data files, and set the appropriate permissions on those files and folders. We then used the Safe Web App viewer to add the index, viewed it, and also added one of the applications with some serial number activation. At this point, we can go to the online panel, and if we select that CAT app and we select the field we want to search for and enter the serial number we want to search, we'll see that customer information that was entered during the activation process of that particular web app.